Hey there, Ashley. Welcome to your natal chart reading. Thank you so much for your patience on this. I normally don't take the full 7 day window to get these back, but it has been a crazy week. Also, hello, blast from the past. I hope you are well. Yeah, I hope you're well. It's been a minute since I've seen you anywhere or talked to you, but I hope you are well. But let's go ahead and jump in. So, I'm going to be going over your sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, North Node, Chiron, and you're ascending. So I'm really excited about this because honestly, out of tarot and astrology, the astrology stuff is really my favorite. So let's go ahead. I'm going to be highlighting these as we go through so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. But let's go ahead and start with your sun sign. So your sun sign is in the sixth house and you are a Sagittarius. Love that energy for you. I am a Sagittarius rising, so it's like one of my major three. Love a Sag. But your sun sign really is the essence that makes you up. So, with your sun being there, you're going to see that Sagittarian energy kind of all over your entire chart. It does bleed into everything, but there obviously, with other aspects, you're going to see other signs come through more with certain things. But this is like the core essence and the foundation that the whole chart is built on. So, Sagittarius, what is that? We have a knowledge seeker, obviously, someone that likes travel and not just your basic travel. Usually it's world travel. You like to move around. Sagittarius doesn't necessarily like to be tied down for any reason either. You don't normally catch Sagittarians getting married or having kids. Not always the case. Obviously, my husband's a Sagittarius. We're married. Like, it's not always the truth, but, and obviously, there are a lot of Sagittarius parents out there, but they tend to be more of the free thinkers. They really, really, really love their freedom. The hardest thing for a Sagittarius to endure is when somebody backs them into a corner. That's something that is just not appreciated by a Sag, really by anyone, but Sagittarians, because you guys are such deep thinkers and you want to know and you truly seek after knowledge. It's like extremely hard for you guys to a not know something or to be backed into a corner when you know that you are very smart and possess a lot of knowledge. So having the sun sign in the sixth house, also way to be solid. I'm also a sun sign in the sixth, but having your sun sign in the sixth house is the house of Virgo. And if you're new to the housing system, basically houses have to do with the time that you were born. So the sixth house is the house of Virgo. This is about routines, health, service, and just helping others, really. When you have a sun sign in the sixth, you are more likely to be someone that really does care for humanity and wants to help them. A lot of people with sun in the sixth house will be a nurse, a doctor, somebody that does a service for others in the health industry. You may even be a little bit more interested in the health industry, period. Not like the diet crazes or fads, but actual like nutrition might be something that you're very interested in. And honestly, you're just a very giving person. Virgo is the sign of gratitude and giving. So you're somebody who really wants to give to others of your time, of your space, of your energy when you are connected with the right people. Now, a Sagittarius is not going to tolerate a dumb person. They're not going to tolerate someone that just doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. So, obviously, for the right person, you are somebody that really wants to give to those that you care so deeply about. And on top of that, Virgo really is the analytical thinker. So when you have that in a combination with a knowledge seeker and an analytical mind, you are somebody you probably like a lot of true crime too. You are somebody that more than likely you just really like to sit and think and analyze things. These people usually really also are into reading and books, which I'm pretty sure that's true for you. I know you used to have a book channel, or maybe still do, I'm not sure. But avid readers usually always wanting to know things. So beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Let's go ahead and erase that. So moving into your moon sign. Now, what the heck is the moon sign? So your moon sign is where your emotions are, how you kind of perceive your own emotion, how you deal with emotional turmoil to a degree. This is also your deepest personal needs. Now, the first thing I can point out here with Gemini in the 12th house for you is Nobody will ever be bored with you. Your partner will never be bored with you because Gemini is all over the place. You actually have some really opposing energy here because Sagittarius's exact opposite is a Gemini, and you actually have a few. You have a Gemini stellium in your chart. I just realize you also have a Scorpio stellium. When you have a stellium of something in your chart, that means that you have three or more placements of the same sign. So your chart would be heavily influenced by those aspects. You do though. You have a Gemini stellium because you have Jupiter in Gemini and you also have an ascending in Gemini. We'll get into the ascending a little bit later, but your partner will never be bored with you. You are somebody who probably really does enjoy spontaneity, especially having that Sagittarius energy in there too. But what I was going to say about the opposing forces, which is so fascinating to me, is Gemini. So you have Sagittarius, who is the deep thinker. They want to know everything all the way down to the core of things. And then you have Gemini, who's like, I just want to know a bunch of little random facts so I can be like a great conversationalist. And so you get a mix of both. You're not only deeply a knowledge seeker and you know a lot of things, but you also know how to express those things. You, I imagine, are somebody who could probably talk all day long because every single one of your major three, which are your sun, moon, and rising, fall into a very communicative sign. So and energy from a Gemini doesn't play. I'm also a Gemini moon. So your deepest personal need, you need somebody who's going to converse with you constantly. Like you probably are somebody that you don't necessarily harbor your emotions really deep. You're very open about discussing them. You don't mind letting people know how you're feeling. And you're probably all over the place with them because Gemini cannot make up their damn mind to save their life. It's like 1 minute you're like, oh, I think I'm feeling this because I experienced this somewhere in my life. And then the next it's like, no, that's not really a big deal. Like, um, Gemini is a very like fickle, flighty energy. So they're very fun though. Very fun. You will never not have a good time with a Gemini because they will keep you so occupied. So in your emotional stance, like I said, nothing will ever be a stalemate there because the spontaneity will keep your partner on their toes consistently. And um, as a deepest personal need, you just need great conversation. And your partner needs to be able to make you laugh. Or even the company. It doesn't have to be a romantic partner. The company that you keep, you really enjoy humor. Especially as a Sagittarius sun, you really enjoy humor. Your partner or your friends or family, they need to be funny. You enjoy a good laugh. That's something that like really warms your heart. And having a 12th house placement there, that is a little bit difficult. I'm not going to lie to you because the 12th house corresponds to Pisces, and Pisces is probably one of the hardest places to have in a moon sign. You're not a Pisces moon, but because you have a Pisces influence there with the house, Pisces are naturally very broody and very dreamy and romantic and just very like quiet and also deeply spiritual. When you see people that have a lot of Pisces in their chart, they tend to be more on the spiritual side of things. They're usually also very natural born healers. But for you, being that you have this Pisces Gemini thing going on, I think it's actually a really nice balance because Gemini is known for, again, just having like the gift of gab and being a huge talker. But because you also have this Pisces mysterious side, I think you also know when to back down and keep certain things to yourself. And with that Sagittarius overruling everything, that's almost like a knowledge is power kind of thing. And not in like a gross, creepy way, but in just like, you might hear someone say something. It's like, to me, it's like the Mean Girls effect in the movie where she's like, oh my God, I love your bracelet. Where'd you get it? And then she turns around and she's like, oh my God, that's the ugliest effing bracelet I've ever seen. But you would be like the Katie Herod in the situation where you just overheard it and didn't say anything. So, yeah, sorry, that was a really interesting analogy I just threw out there. But I do think it's a really nice, comfortable balance for you. And again, I would say just be grateful it's not a Pisces moon full on because those are not easy to have. Now, moving into the sign of Mercury. Oop, that was a terrible way of drawing that, Chloe. Okay, moving into the sign of Mercury. Mercury is how we communicate with the world at large, how we get our ideas across, our points across. And you have Scorpio in the sixth. Now, Scorpio is the sign that tends to hold back. They will hold back information. They before they really speak their mind on something that they even if you know a lot about it, especially being a Sagittarius, before you speak your mind or your opinion on something, you are going to collect all of the data. You are going to sit back because you have to think about Scorpio energy almost like the scorpion, which is what they are. You know, scorpions don't just strike whenever they think it's applicable. They will wait and wait and wait and wait and stalk their prey and then go in for the sting when they know they have it in the bag. So, when you communicate, you're not just spouting off nonsense, which is a really good thing because when you have that double Gemini placement, which we'll talk about that in the ascending in a minute, um, when you have that double dose of Gemini energy, Gemini will just start spouting things off and sound like a crazy person because Gemini is very much like that. So I do think that with this um, Scorpio there, it really helps you to really get the things that you're trying to say out in the appropriate way. And I think honestly, people are going to respect you for that. You're going to have a lot more respect and an easier time communicating because you wait. You're not somebody who just spouts off everything. For example, I'm an Aries Mercury. I never use spell check. I spout everything off that I'm thinking without thinking about the damage that it could do. It's actually a mess. So, um, I feel like you're somebody who really takes the opposite approach of that, and you're going to gather data before you say things, especially because your Mercury is in the sixth house. Again, this is that house of Virgo that is very analytical thinking. So, you're going to analyze the crowd, you're going to analyze the room, you're going to analyze the situation and assess before you proceed. So, it's a really, honestly, a great way to be. I'm a little bit jealous, not going to lie about it. Let's go ahead and erase these and let's talk a little bit about Venus. Now, Venus, this is how you interpret art, beauty, um, romantic relationships to a degree. You are a very intense person because you have Scorpio in the fifth house here. But again, this is a really, really, really beautiful balance because the fifth house corresponds to Leo, who is very playful and can be very childlike in a good way. It's like getting in touch with your inner child to a degree. But then we see Scorpio here, who again is very intense, keeps things to themselves. They tend to not just let everything out all the time. Scorpio is also ruled by the sacral chakra or the genitalia. So they are extremely intense, sensually as well, extremely intense people. And it's just an extremely intense sign. The most intense, I would argue. So, in terms of art and beauty, you are somebody who is going to be a little more on the intense side. You might even find beauty in things that other people don't, in terms of, I don't want to say morbid, but Scorpio tends to have this like morbid streak about them. Like, they will find beauty and symbolism in like death and things like that. They're ruled by the eighth house, which is the house of the occult. So, um, I would say in terms of beauty and art, there is a lot of intense nature there. And in terms of relationships with your partner, now this would deal specifically with a relationship with a like sexual partner here, or like a marriage or what have you. In terms of having Scorpio in Venus, again, you're just somebody who's very deeply passion driven with a lot of sensual energy and someone that honestly people probably find that very sexy. Like your partner probably finds that very sexy. Scorpio have a very natural sexiness to them. They're just sexy people. I don't know how else to say it. They're just very sexy people. But I feel like you have a great balance because with that fifth house coming out, you're not going to be so serious all the time, especially because you have a lot of Gemini influence, which is going to also give you a more like playful nature. So I do think that there is quite a bit of seriousness to how you perceive beauty, but you can also make a really good joke. Like it doesn't have to be so like, nope, this is how it is. And I'm not like, it's not like everything doesn't have to be so stoic. Put it that way, stoic. Not everything has to be so stoic for you. You're that person that like, you're not going to be pissed if someone's laughing at a funeral. Like it's okay. Sometimes death is funny, you know? um, Let's go ahead and talk about Mars. Now, Mars, this is our planet of aggression. This is where when you're arguing with people, this is how it's going to come out when you are mad. Mars is the warrior. So you have Aries in the 11th house, and Aries is hard whenever it's in a very communicative position because Aries doesn't think before they speak. They just start speaking. So when you're mad, you are somebody that is just going to say anything and everything, and it doesn't really like you just start spewing things without thinking of consequence. Only when enraged, though, because again, we have that Mercury up there, so you're going to communicate a little bit slower. But once somebody done pissed you off, that's all bets are off. It doesn't matter. You're mad, and everybody's going to hear and feel and know your rage. However, I will say this with Mars and Aries there together, Mars actually rules over Aries. So there is some level of like comfortable to it. I don't think it really makes you mad when you're mad. Like, I don't think you question your anger. You're like, no, I'm mad and I should be mad. Um, which is definitely not how I am. I have a Cancer Mars and I question my anger all the time. So there is a level of being very comfortable here. And the 11th house is the house of Aquarius. The house of Aquarius deals with friendships. That is what Aquarius is all about, is friendship. And I would say here in this kind of placement, you maybe can tend to be a little bit more on the mean side when you're angry. It might be easier for you because there is a level of almost joy out of anger, which I do believe that anger serves a purpose. And I do think, and this might sound like I'm totally off my rocker, but that's because society makes people feel weird about their emotions. Anger is fun. Like when you get really mad, it feels very like high adrenaline, and it feels very like it's almost the same level of joy. It's just a different expression of joy to a degree because it's very high energy. And so I feel like to a degree, it's very easy for you to almost be that person when you're mad that will take a stab at someone just to take them down a peg because it feels good. So to hell with anybody who ever makes you angry because I feel like you will definitely take them down. I don't think anybody would ever want to mess with you. Um, Moving on to Saturn. Now, Saturn, we have a Saturn return every, what is this, 29 and a half to 30 years. Most people get maybe three of them in their life. Nobody will ever see a fourth unless we learn how to cheat death. But you have Saturn in Capricorn in the seventh. And Saturn is mean, stern dad of the zodiac. This is the planet that rules over responsibility, and Saturn is always here to teach a lesson. So these are like the life lessons that you have to learn. And every 29 and a half to 30 years, Saturn comes back into your alignment, and it's there to teach you a lesson if you haven't already learned it. So with Capricorn in the seventh, Capricorn is first of all, very comfortable. With Capricorn and Saturn, Saturn rules Capricorn. This is great, right? So at least there is this level of like comfortable, comfortable here. But Saturn also going to teach a lesson, and Capricorn has to do with family values, tradition, dogma to a degree. If there's any kind of thing that you're not being highly responsible about, and I mean, that's something I didn't mention earlier with Sagittarius. Sagittarians are known for having a very deep ingrained lazy streak. That just them's the facts. And it's not that you guys are like slobs or the messiest people in the world, but you are known to just kind of be a little bit more carefree and not really want to deal with the mundane. So having a Saturn in Capricorn comes back to kind of bite you there and says, no, you have to deal with the mundane. You have to be responsible. You have to do this because if you don't, this is going to go array. And the seventh house deals with marriage, partnerships, and business contracts and contracts of any kind. So that's why marriage is in the seventh house, is because marriage is a contract. So contracts of any kind. So if there's any kind of contract, whether this be a lease, a car contract, a marriage contract, every 29 and a half to 30 years, something involving contracts is going to spout off and be like, hey, listen here, you need to take care of this because if you don't take care of this, I'm going to keep bringing it back to bite you. So that's really what Saturn is about. Let's go ahead, which I should know how old you are because I do have your birth information. You have already experienced your first Saturn return. So, I hope it treated you well. Like I said, if you've already like learned the lessons, I feel like it's not so difficult to go through a Saturn return, but usually they're there to kind of shake things up. And sometimes that can, not always, but that can also be difficulty in marriage specifically. Like your relationship might get a little shaken every 29 and a half to 30 years. But I always just kind of like to put it into the pretense of contracts, period, because it's not always people's relationships. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this North Node in the 10th house. So, having a North Node in Pisces in the 10th, we cannot talk about your North Node without talking about the South Node. Your South Node is in Virgo in the 4th house. So, this is very interesting to me because when you have so the North Node is like your soul's purpose in life. The North Node is what says, this is why you're divinely here. It's not like you're going to have this many kids. It's not like that kind of this is why you're here or you're going to have this kind of job. It's more like, hey, as long as you're kind of flowing in line with this, you're on the right track with whatever you're doing. And the South Node is what you came into this life already with, whether you believe in reincarnation and you incarnated with it, or you picked it up from parents, maybe. It was just something that you were already innately pretty well gifted with in this life when you came in. So, your South Node in Virgo in the 4th house, this automatically makes you, and I mean, you have a sixth house sun sign, which is the house of Virgo. So, um, with having Virgo as a South Node, you would have come in or learned very early on that being a critical thinker is something that is a strong suit for you. It may have caused you to be a little bit more overly critical of yourself and overly critical of others. That's something with Virgo that Virgo just really possesses that ability to be a little too nitpicky sometimes and a little bit too critical. Um, and on top of that, with Virgo, again, you might just be a natural giver. And the thing about that, the thing about being a natural giver is you really want to use your South Node to kind of push you into the North Node because, again, that's what you're here for. So, having a North Node in Pisces, this is you getting in tune with your own spirituality. This is you getting in tune with the dreamy and not being so practical like Virgo all the time. Virgo is extremely practical. They don't live with their head in the clouds, and you are meant to kind of finesse yourself into creating your own reality, living your actual dreams out, and just being in that more romantic, dreamy state and not taking things so seriously all the time. And with the 10th and 4th house here, the 4th house where you came from, this is the house of stability. This is the house of Cancer. It's about family and nurture and giving love to others. So you already had this like beautiful innate ability to nurture, and you're actually meant to be somebody who exudes more or excels more in their career. The 10th house deals with the career. So this is making and paving your own path in this life. It doesn't really have anything to do with nurturing others. You're meant to really just take care of yourself, provide for yourself, and um, even if it's like running your own business, people with a 10th house North Node tend to really excel at that. Running your own kind of business, going after your own in the business world, period. So I love that because you have this really beautiful balance with a Pisces in a 10th house. That's like basically saying using this like romantic fantasy idea to really boost yourself on a in a career level kind of way. So you don't really see those two match up very often. So I think that's really beautiful, and it's more about taking care of yourself and not taking care of others so much. Um, and just moving into more of a dreamy way of being. And so it's almost like you want to find the healthy balance between the two of those in this life. That's what you're looking for. Now, moving into your Chiron. Chiron is, people say there's a lot of things about Chiron, but the number one thing is people say that Chiron is the unhealable wound, and it's something that you can't heal from in this life. It's always there to torment you. My personal belief as an astrologer, I think we can heal from these things, and becoming aware is step number one. So, you have a Chiron in Cancer in the first house. Now, the thing with having a Chiron in Cancer, I also have one of these. My husband has one of these. They suck. They all suck. None of the Chirons are good. They all suck. Um, Having a Chiron in Cancer is about having an unhealable injury or a wound with family. We're not as close to our family. We feel like we've been betrayed by them. We feel like they don't understand us. Maybe you had a really unhappy childhood. It usually has to do with dealing with the past and dealing with ancestors and the pain from your childhood. And on top of that, having a Chiron in the first house, this is about um, you feeling like no matter how hard you put your best efforts forth in life and how hard you try in life, you constantly feel like you're never getting anywhere. You constantly feel like these setbacks are just crushing you. And the first house is the house of the self. So I find that personally, where the first house is concerned in Chiron, it is almost one of the hardest because it has to do with you purely and not necessarily other people. It also deals a lot with um you having to feel like you're always scratching to try to survive. And not even like you don't have your basic needs met, like food, shelter, water, that kind of thing, but you always feel like you're having to just survive even in your own head mentally. So it's difficult. It's a difficult on both sides. Like I said, all the Chirons really suck, so there's not really one good one that's there. Unfortunately, I wish they all could be just completely amazing, but they're not. So that's what we know about Chiron. And lastly, oh, well, not quite lastly, we're going to talk about your elements a little bit too, but your ascending sign. Your ascending, this is part of the major three. If you're not familiar with astrology, when people ask for the major three or what are your sun, moon, rising, you're a double Gemini with a sun sign in Sagittarius, which is awesome. So much mutable energy. You are such a curious cat. I love this. I don't think I've ever seen so much mutable energy. You are such a curious person, and I love that for you. So, with an ascending sign, this is always in the first house. No matter what, no matter whose it is, it always has to do with the self. And our ascending sign is how we see the world and how the world sees us. So, people upon first impression could even mistake you for a Gemini sun sign. It's tricky like that. But with your ascending in Gemini, you are somebody that is probably a little bit more on the playful side. And I mean, I feel like because you're a Sagittarius, yours really play well together. Most of the time, this is not the case. It's rare to see something like that, I feel, at least in my years of astrology stuff, of being an astrologer. I find that I don't see that a lot where they kind of complement each other to a degree. But having an ascending in Gemini, um, again, you're a very curious person. Gemini has a very curious nature about them. They are very versatile, they are very adaptable. Um, However, I do feel that you also have this ability to excel at anything you want. Like anything you want, you're so curious. And because you want to know the deeper logical side of things with Sagittarius in your sun sign, you could excel at pretty well anything. But with Gemini, it's this constant need for change, constant, whether it's moving furniture around, changing jobs, changing an art design, changing a layout for something. If MySpace was still a thing, I feel like Gemini is the energy of wanting to change the layout every single day. Wear those HTML codes out, we're always changing it up. Um, they Gemini does not like to choose just one thing ever. Extremely fickle. And on top of that, there's a lot of, again, communicative, and you have that in your moon sign too. Just a lot of talking. I feel like with Gemini, a lot of times it's very hard to get a word in edgewise. Um, and you honestly have the gift of gab, especially having these three placements that all work together, the Sagittarius, Gemini, Gemini. you have the gift of gab. You will always be able to have people listen to you. They always want to listen to you because you're very charismatic and able to do that. The one thing I do want to say about the ascending sign in Gemini is I feel like Gemini get accused constantly of being two-faced. And I firmly disagree with this 1000%. I think it personally is that Gemini has the ability to see things from all angles. Like you'll hear one person's side of the story and it's like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. And then you'll hear the other person's side. It's like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. You don't live in a black and white reality. You live in a very like shaded gray area, I guess you could say. And you should really use that to your advantage because honestly, even though some people are not going to understand it because you just don't really like to pick a side on things, it honestly is a good thing. It makes you a really good guide for other people, especially having that sun sign in the sixth house and wanting to give to others. It makes you really like you're very good at zooming out and being able to see the full perspective of things before just making or casting any kind of judgment. So, that is that for the ascending in Gemini. Now, lastly, the thing I want to cover here for you is going over your elements. So, you have pretty heavy air. There's a lot of air in your chart, 10 air placements, followed up by 7 in water, 6 in fire, and 4 in earth. The other elements are all pretty well balanced, but having a lot of air in your chart is always going to make you more communicative, always more indecisive, always more um just like you are somebody that has probably a lot of boundless energy. Somebody that is able to bounce from one task to the next very seamlessly. And maybe it might be a little bit harder for you to make a concrete decision because there is so many different options presented in front of you. I always like to say that Sagittarius is the air sign of fire signs, or the fire sign of air signs. Like, if we could move Sagittarius somewhere else, they would fit very comfortably as an air sign, because of how similar to Gemini they can be. To me, they're just like a deeper, more intellectual version of Gemini. Um, Having water as your follow up, water is our intuition more than anything and our emotions. So you have that coming right up behind all of your communicative energy. And fire, honestly, I have a very fire heavy aspected chart. I have something crazy like 16 fire placements. I would say you're probably somebody that, yes, you're very charismatic and all over the place and boundless energy. But in terms of fire, I don't think you're one to be the type to start a flame war. You're not the type to go out and be so like creativity drives you, but not to the fullest capacity. It's present, but it's not your number one. You would rather be conversing. And Earth, I would say, um, you are somebody that definitely, I don't even want to say that you're not grounded. I mean, with all that air energy, it would seem that you're a lot more up here and a lot less like down on the ground. But I just feel like it's all a really great balance. Yes, you have a ton of air energy, but the other three to me are so there's not a big enough gap to really say, like, oh, there isn't really enough of this. Like, honestly, I have seen charts where there are zero in some of them. So, honestly, I think it's a really well balanced chart. I loved getting to know so much more about your personality. I hope this resonated with you. And this was so fun. It was fun getting to hang out with a blast from the past. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And yeah, I hope you're well and have a great rest of your day. Bye.